Star Citizen is dead for solo players. That's the line that's been echoing through every forum, every Discord server, every comment section since patch 4.5 dropped engineering into our laps. Thousands of players nodding along, convinced their solo careers just got vaporized. Except there's a problem with this narrative. It's almost entirely fiction. 3 weeks of systematic testing across every profession, every ship class, every scenario the community claimed was impossible now. The data tells a completely different story. Solo play isn't dying. It's evolving into something that actually rewards skill instead of just time investment. When those first engineering patch notes landed, that immediate gut reaction probably hit you too. That sinking feeling watching your carefully planned solo operation suddenly look obsolete. Maybe you'd spent months grinding for a constellation, building your trade routes, perfecting your mining circuits. Then boom, patch notes talking about power management, component degradation, fire suppression systems, all sounding like they needed dedicated crew members just to keep your ship from exploding mid-quantum. That anxiety? Completely valid. The patch notes read like a death sentence for independent operators. But patch notes and actual gameplay live in different universes sometimes. What actually happens when you undock and start running missions bears almost no resemblance to the apocalyptic scenarios being painted across social media. The gap between perception and reality has gotten so wide that players are literally making career decisions based on incomplete information, selling ships they don't need to sell, joining orgs they don't want to join, all because the loudest voices convinced everyone that solo play just became impossible. Solo play means operating without a safety net. No gunner watching your six, no engineer babysitting your power plant, no navigator plotting quantum routes while you focus on flying. Just you making every decision, managing every system, taking full responsibility for outcomes. It's the difference between being a freelancer and being middle management. One gives you complete autonomy, the other buries you in coordination overhead. And if you find this breakdown valuable, the algorithm needs to know this kind of detailed analysis matters to the community. That little subscribe button tells YouTube that in-depth content deserves visibility over clickbait. More importantly, drop a comment about your actual solo play experience in 4.5. Not what you heard, not what you assume, but what you've personally tested. Real data from real players is how we cut through the noise and figure out what's actually happening versus what people think is happening. The narrative says engineering transformed Star Citizen into something like EVE Online's fleet operations, where solo players are just targets waiting to get deleted by organized groups. But that comparison falls apart under scrutiny. Engineering added depth, not dependency. There's a massive difference between those two concepts that most analysis completely misses. Most players saw engineering stations and immediately translated that to required crew positions. The assumption chain went, more systems equals more complexity equals more people needed. Logical on the surface, completely wrong in practice. Engineering actually penalizes poorly coordinated groups while rewarding solo pilots who develop deep system knowledge. A mediocre 3-person crew often performs worse than a skilled solo pilot because coordination overhead destroys efficiency faster than extra hands create it. The public test universe version of engineering that content creators tested in November, that build was genuinely hostile to solo play. Components exploded if you looked at them wrong. Wear rates degraded systems so aggressively that mid-mission repairs became mandatory, not optional. Power plants overheated during normal operation. Those early test builds deserved every criticism they received. But then something unusual happened. Cloud Imperium actually processed feedback and adjusted parameters before live release. Critical explosion chances dropped from around 40% down to 20%. Wear rates got cut by more than half. Heat generation curves flattened significantly. The version that went live in early December was fundamentally different from what everyone tested and panicked about. So you've got this situation where the entire community formed opinions based on a build that no longer exists. Those early PTU horror stories became embedded in collective memory, even though the actual release version plays completely differently. It's like judging a restaurant based on reviews from their soft opening, when half the kitchen staff was still in training. Testing this properly meant ignoring the noise and running actual missions. Drake Cutter loaded with cargo. 8 consecutive runs from Crusader to Microtech. Standard trade route, nothing fancy. Total engineering intervention required, checking the status panel twice. That's it. No emergency repairs, no component failures, no fires spreading through compartments. The ship operated exactly like it did in 3.23, just with more information available if you wanted to optimize performance. Combat scenarios obviously increase complexity. Taking damage accelerates everything. But even there, the difference between more challenging and impossible is enormous. A low-risk bounty mission in that same cutter, some hits taken, one component dropping into yellow status. Mission completed, flew back to station, repairs cost under 5,000 AUEC. 18 minutes total including repair time. 45,000 AUEC profit. Those aren't the numbers of a broken system. Those are the numbers of a balanced risk-reward loop that actually works. Your Constellation is probably sitting in your hangar right now while you fly something smaller, convinced that medium ships became crew-dependent overnight. Or maybe you've been running the same simple loops in a starter ship, afraid to upgrade because what's the point if I can't fly it solo anyway? The Spectrum forums overflow with variations of this exact anxiety. Players who've built entire careers around specific ships, suddenly paralyzed by uncertainty, watching their favorite content creators explain why their preferred gameplay is dead now. Except when you actually take those medium ships out, medium ships, Constellation Andromeda, Drake Corsair, Emiska Freelancer Max, Origin 400i, Crusader Mercury Starrunner, these occupy this fascinating zone where engineering actually enhances solo play instead of complicating it. Small ships don't have enough systems to make engineering meaningful. Capital ships genuinely do need multiple people for optimal operation. But medium ships, they landed in this perfect sweet spot. The Constellation Andromeda demonstrates this better than anything else currently flyable. Engineering panel accessible from the pilot seat. You're not running through corridors mid-combat. 4 size 5 guns on pilot control. No turret gunners required for primary firepower. Component layout concentrated enough that you can reach critical systems quickly if something needs manual intervention. Cargo capacity sufficient for serious profit. Quantum fuel tank large enough for extended operations. Running cargo in a Constellation solo, you develop this rhythm. Power to engines for quantum. Shift to shields when approaching stations in contested space. Back to balanced for normal flight. If you get interdicted, weapons and shields get priority while engines drop to minimum. It becomes muscle memory after a dozen runs, taking maybe 5% of your conscious attention. The fascinating part? Performance actually improved compared to flying with a random crew. No coordination overhead. No, hey, can you balance the power distribution? Followed by 10 seconds of silence while they figure out which panel does what. No miscommunication about when to raise shields or divert power. Just immediate execution of decisions based on complete situational awareness. The Corsair pushes this even further. Everything critical within arm's reach of the pilot seat. Hull tough enough to absorb punishment while you manage systems. The Mercury trades some durability for speed, but that speed becomes a defensive tool that solo pilots can leverage better than crews because there's no coordination delay on the decision to run. What's actually happening is that engineering raised the skill ceiling while keeping the skill floor accessible. Bad pilots perform worse now because they ignore systems and just fly like nothing changed. Average pilots perform about the same because they do basic power management and that's sufficient. Good pilots perform significantly better because they're actively playing their ship's systems like an instrument, extracting performance that simpler gameplay couldn't provide. 3 light fighters jumped to Constellation during a high-value cargo run near a pyro station. Old gameplay? That's probably a loss. 3 versus 1, light fighters can just circle and chip away. But with active power management, shields held strong enough that station defenses had time to respond. One of the attackers actually stopped shooting to type, "How are your shields this strong?" in chat. The answer wasn't better components or some secret loadout. It was just active engineering creating a 30 to 40% effective shield strength increase through proper power distribution and management. That's not a fluke. That's the system working as designed, rewarding player skill and knowledge with tangible performance advantages. Imagine you've just spent 2 hours grinding up enough credits for your first real cargo ship upgrade, finally moving past the starter ships into something that can actually generate serious income. You pick the Freelancer Max because it's got that perfect balance of cargo space and affordability. First major haul, 400,000 AUEC worth of medical supplies, heading to a station in Pyro. Quantum travel goes fine and you're feeling good, already calculating how many runs until the next ship upgrade. Then you drop out of Quantum and there's a Mantis sitting there. Interdiction field active with 2 escort fighters. Your heart drops. This is it. Your entire investment about to evaporate. But you've spent the last week actually learning the engineering systems instead of just complaining about them. Power immediately dumps into shields and weapons. You angle the ship to keep the Mantis in your forward firing arc while the fighters have to approach from angles where your shields are strongest. They're coordinating in voice chat probably, calling targets and managing their attack pattern. You're just flying, except you're not just flying. You're actively managing power distribution every few seconds based on where damage is coming from. When the fighters swing around to your port side, power shifts to port shields. When they break off to reset their approach, it flows back to weapons for burst damage on the Mantis. Your shield faces are never depleted because you're manually managing distribution faster than their coordination can adapt to. They eventually break off. Not because they couldn't win, 3 ships should beat 1, but because you made it expensive enough that the time investment wasn't worth their potential profit. You limp into station with 1 component in red status, shields at 30% but cargo intact. Repairs cost 18,000 AUEC. Net profit, 382,000 AUEC. That moment crystallizes the entire engineering philosophy. It didn't make solo play impossible, it made skill matter more than ship count. Cloud Imperium's ship pipeline tells you everything about their actual design philosophy versus the community narrative. The Drake Clipper announcement came with explicit marketing language, designed for solo players who want a generalist ship. Not can be flown solo if you really want to. Not works better with crew, but technically soloable. Specifically designed for solo operation. Look at the entire Drake manufacturer lineup. Cutter, pure solo starter ship. Cutlass Black, the iconic solo medium ship. Corsair, exploration ship with pilot-controlled firepower. Caterpillar, yes, it's large, but it's specifically designed so one person can operate it for cargo hauling. These aren't accidents or coincidences. They're deliberate design choices acknowledging that a substantial portion of the player base prefers independent operation. The Clipper takes this philosophy even further. Medical facilities for self-sufficiency, crafting stations for equipment independence, cargo capacity for trade, decent firepower for self-defense, exploration capabilities for discovery gameplay. It's essentially a mobile-based designed around the premise that some players don't want to depend on others for basic functionality. But the design philosophy goes deeper than individual ships. Component accessibility matters enormously for solo viability. Ships with engineering stations on the same deck as the pilot seat? Solo-friendly. Ships with critical components spread across 3 decks requiring a full minute of running to reach? Crew-dependent. The Constellation puts everything critical within a 15-second sprint from the pilot seat. The 890 jump spread systems across multiple decks specifically because it's designed as a cruise ship. If you're building a solo fleet right now, the 25 to 100 meter range is your target zone. Anything smaller lacks the capability for serious profit. Anything larger starts requiring genuine crew for optimal operation. Not impossible solo, but significantly more challenging. Pilot-controlled weapons are non-negotiable. Turrets are nice for crew, but useless when you're alone. Engineering stations accessible from or near the pilot position. Component layouts concentrated rather than distributed. Specific recommendations. Cutlass Black or Nomad for starting out. Both under 2 million AUEC in-game. Both highly capable, both teach engineering without overwhelming complexity. Freelancer Max for the mid-game cargo grind. Best profit per hour ratio for solo operators under 5 million credits. Constellation Andromeda for the endgame. 4 pilot-controlled size 5 guns. Massive cargo capacity. Tough enough to survive mistakes. Complex enough to reward skill development. The Corsair deserves special mention because it's basically a Constellation with better pilot firepower and worse durability. That's a trade-off that favors skilled pilots who can avoid damage over average pilots who need the hull to absorb mistakes. Mercury Star Runner trades combat capability for speed, which becomes a defensive tool. Can't kill what you can't catch. Advanced solo players should look at the 400i, underrated for combat because people focus on its luxury features, but it's got excellent pilot weapons, outstanding component access, and shields strong enough to outlast most medium ships in sustained combat. Plus, the cargo capacity makes it viable for trade when you're not fighting. Spectrum forums have this 47-page thread arguing about whether solo play is dead. 47 pages, thousands of posts. You scroll through and it's just the same argument cycling endlessly. Engineering killed solo play versus I'm literally playing solo right now and it's fine, with no resolution because both sides are talking past each other. Reddit's doing the same dance. Half the posts are dramatic goodbye letters from players quitting because CIG abandoned solo players. The other half are screenshots of multi-million credit earnings, with titles like Solo Play is Dead BTW. Both perspectives existing simultaneously in the same community space, completely unable to reconcile. What's actually happening is a skill gap revealing itself. The players struggling are the ones who haven't adapted their approach. They're flying exactly like they did in 3.23, completely ignoring engineering systems, then wondering why performance feels worse. Meanwhile, the players thriving are the ones who invested a few hours learning the new mechanics and now have access to performance advantages that didn't exist before. There's this developing recognition among experienced solo players. You can identify players who don't understand engineering immediately in PvP encounters. Their power management is non-existent. Their shields fold under pressure that should be survivable. Their weapons run out of power mid-fight because they never adjusted distribution. It's like watching someone try to drive a manual transmission car without using the clutch. Technically, the car still moves, but performance is terrible. The community split isn't really about whether solo play is viable. It's about whether players are willing to learn new systems or whether they want the game to remain static forever. Engineering added depth. Depth requires learning. Some players embrace that. Others reject it and blame the game for their unwillingness to adapt. Learning engineering properly takes about 4 hours of focused practice, not 4 hours per ship. 4 hours total to understand the fundamental principles that apply across all vessels. After that, learning a specific ship's quirks takes maybe 30 minutes. Start with your main ship in Arena Commander free flight mode. No mission pressure, no financial risk, just you and the engineering systems. Spend 30 minutes just experimenting with power distribution. Max out weapons and watch how quickly your power plant drains. Shift everything to shields and observe the recharge rate increase. Balance everything and see how it affects overall performance. Overheat components deliberately to learn what that looks like and how long recovery takes. Then take that same ship into low-risk missions. Rookie bounties work perfectly. Enemies that won't kill you if you make mistakes, but enough pressure to force you to manage systems under stress. Simple cargo runs between safe stations, mining and non-contested space. Content where failure costs you time but not your ship. Build muscle memory for common scenarios. Quantum travel, power to engines. Approaching a station, shields up. Combat starts, weapons and shields, engines to minimum. Taking damage from one direction, shift shield power to that face. Component overheating, reduce power to that system temporarily. These responses need to become automatic, not conscious decisions. Optimize your ship loadout specifically for solo operation. Components with high durability ratings reduce maintenance frequency. The best power plant you can afford. Power is the foundation of everything in engineering. Skimping here cripples your entire ship. Weapons that don't require constant manual aiming work better when you're also managing engineering. Gimbaled loadouts or high alpha fixed weapons that only need brief aiming windows. The common objection: I don't have time to learn complex systems, I just want to play. Fair enough, but consider this. You're already spending time playing less efficiently. 4 hours of focused learning translates to hundreds of hours of better performance afterward. The time investment pays for itself within a week of normal play. What this knowledge provides, you'll outperform the majority of players who are ignoring engineering entirely. You'll survive encounters that would kill less informed pilots. You'll complete missions faster because your ship performs better. You'll spend less on repairs because you prevent damage instead of just tanking it. All of this translates directly to more credits per hour, which means faster progression toward whatever goals you've set. Component management goes deeper than most players realize. Every component has optimal operating temperatures and power levels. Running a power plant at 100% capacity constantly accelerates wear dramatically compared to running it at 80% with occasional spikes. Shields recharge faster when they're not actively being hit. Breaking line of sight for even 3 seconds can restore 20 to 30% shield strength if you've properly distributed power. Weapon capacitors are the most misunderstood system in the game. Most pilots fire until capacitors are empty, wait for full recharge, then fire again. That's inefficient. Optimal firing patterns depend on your power distribution. If you've got excess power to weapons, you can sustain longer bursts because recharge happens during firing. If power is balanced or low, short bursts with longer recharge windows work better. Heat management becomes critical in extended combat. Firing weapons generates heat. Running shields at maximum generates heat. Quantum drives generate massive heat during spool-up. Stack all of these simultaneously and you can overheat multiple components, forcing emergency shutdowns at the worst possible moments. Skilled pilots stagger heat-generating activities. Fire weapons, let them cool while shields absorb damage, then fire again. Never max out everything simultaneously unless it's an emergency. Component targeting changes everything in PvP. Most players just shoot center mass and hope. Informed players target specific components to disable rather than destroy. Taking out a power plant forces the enemy into emergency power mode, disabling most systems. Destroying a shield generator creates a permanent weak point. Hitting engines limits mobility. A constellation with one engine destroyed can still fly, but maneuverability drops by 40%, making it an easy target for follow-up attacks. Quantum fuel management matters more than most players realize. Running out of quantum fuel in a deep space used to be an inconvenience. Call for rescue or self-destruct. With engineering, it's potentially fatal because you can't quantum to safety if something goes wrong. Always maintain at least 30% quantum fuel as emergency reserve. Plan routes with refueling stops. Carry extra fuel and cargo if you're doing extended operations in remote space. The real advanced technique: learning to read your opponent's engineering state during combat. Shields flickering? Their power plant is struggling. Weapons firing in short bursts instead of sustained streams? Capacitor management problems? Ship maneuvering sluggishly? Probably engine damage or power distribution issues. You can exploit these weaknesses if you recognize them. Push hard when their shields are weak. Back off when they're at full strength. Force them to make power distribution choices that create openings. Cargo hauling remains the most straightforward solo income source, and engineering barely affected it. You load cargo, you quantum them to destination, you unload cargo. The only engineering consideration is maintaining enough power for quantum drives and shields. A freelancer max running standard trade routes generates 300,000 to 500,000 AUEC per hour depending on route efficiency and market conditions. Engineering added maybe 2 minutes per hour of additional management time. That's a 3% efficiency decrease in exchange for more engaging gameplay. Mining got more complex but also more profitable. The Prospector, the iconic solo mining ship, now requires active power management during extraction. High-value ores often require maximum laser power, which drains your power plant quickly. Skilled miners learn to pulse their lasers instead of sustaining constant beam, reducing power consumption by 30 to 40% while maintaining extraction efficiency. This technique didn't exist before engineering because there was no reason to manage power that carefully. Now it's the difference between filling your cargo hold or running out of power mid-extraction. Salvage operations benefit enormously from engineering because salvage generates massive amounts of scrap quickly, and processing that scrap requires sustained power to cutting tools. The Drake Vulture can generate 200,000 to 400,000 AUEC per hour in good salvage fields, and engineering actually improved this because better power management means faster processing times. Players who optimize their power distribution can process salvage 15 to 20% faster than players who ignore engineering, translating directly to higher income. Bounty hunting shows the biggest variance in solo viability post-engineering. Low-risk bounties, single ships, minimal backup, predictable behavior remain highly profitable for solo pilots. 45,000 to 85,000 AUEC per mission, stackable for simultaneous completion, potentially over 1,000,000 credits per hour at maximum efficiency. But high-risk bounties against multiple targets or capital ships, those genuinely benefit from crew now because you need sustained damage output while managing engineering under fire. The economic calculation becomes, do you want maximum credits per hour, or do you want engaging gameplay with good credits per hour? Maximum efficiency still favors simple cargo loops that require minimal engineering interaction, but many players find that mind-numbing and bounty hunting or mining provides more engaging gameplay with only slightly lower income. Engineering made the engaging options more engaging without destroying their economic viability. Reputation systems amplify income over time. A new player running rookie cargo missions makes 30,000 to 50,000 a UEC per run. That same player, after building reputation with a faction, makes 45,000 to 75,000 a UEC on identical missions, a 50% increase just from reputation bonuses. This compounds over time. A player with maximum reputation in multiple factions can cherry-pick the highest-paying missions across all available options, while new players take whatever they can get. The progression pathway looks like this. Start with starter ship doing basic missions, 100,000 to 200,000 a UEC per hour. Upgrade to dedicated profession ship like Prospector or Cutlass Black, income jumps to 300,000 to 500,000 per hour. Build reputation and optimize routes, income reaches 500,000 to 800,000 per hour. Upgrade to medium ships like Constellation or Freelancer Max, income hits 800,000 to 1.2 million per hour. Master advanced techniques and maintain maximum reputation. Top performers reach 1.5 to 2 million AUEC per hour solo. That top tier requires significant skill and knowledge, but it's absolutely achievable solo. You're not locked out of high income just because you don't have crew. You're locked out of high income if you don't develop skills and knowledge, which is exactly how progression should work. AI blades represent the planned solution for solo players who want to operate large ships without human crew. These are computer components that automate specific ship functions: turret operation, power management assistance, engineering monitoring, damage control coordination. Essentially hiring a robot crew member that lives in your ship's computer system. Development status: officially on the roadmap, no specific release date, targeted for before 1.0 launch. That's frustratingly vague, but at least confirms the feature exists in active development rather than being theoretical future content that might never materialize. The design philosophy behind AI blades matters more than the specific implementation details. Cloud Imperium explicitly stated that AI blades will be less effective than skilled human crew members. A human engineer will always outperform an AI blade running engineering automation. A human gunner will always have better target prioritization than an automated turret. This creates meaningful differentiation. Solo players with AI blades remain viable, but coordinated crews maintain advantages. That's actually good design. If AI blades matched human performance, there'd be no reason to ever crew ships. Just fill every station with perfect AI that never makes mistakes, never needs coordination, never has communication delays. That would kill multi-crew gameplay entirely. By making AI blades competent but not optimal, the design preserves both playstyles. What this means practically, solo players will be able to operate large ships like the Constellation Andromeda, Corsair, or even capital ships like the Polaris using AI blades to cover functions they can't personally manage. Performance will be lower than a fully crewed version of the same ship, but capability will exist. A solo Polaris with AI blades won't win against a fully crewed Polaris, but it'll be functional for PvE content, exploration, and logistics operations. The timeline frustration is real. Players want this now, not before 1.0 eventually. But the current engineering system was explicitly designed with AI blades in mind. The reason engineering feels manageable solo on medium ships is because that's the intended baseline. AI blades will extend that baseline upward to larger ships, but the fundamental solo viability already exists for the majority of flyable vessels. Starter ships, Aurora, Mustang, Pisces, engineering barely affects these because there's almost nothing to manage. One power plant, minimal components, simple systems. These remain perfectly viable for new players learning the game. The Pisces especially deserves mention as potentially the best pure starter ship for solo players because it's got cargo space, decent speed, and simple enough systems that engineering never becomes overwhelming. Light fighters, Arrow, Gladius, Hornet, these are pure combat ships with engineering focused entirely on combat performance. Power management becomes critical because you're constantly balancing weapons, shields, and engines during dogfights. Solo viability is perfect because these ships are designed for single pilots. Engineering actually improved light fighter gameplay by adding depth to combat beyond just point and shoot. Medium fighters, Vanguard series, Hurricane, Scorpius. This is where crew versus solo starts mattering. The Hurricane and Scorpius have turrets that are useless solo, making them less effective than dedicated solo fighters. The Vanguard series works beautifully solo because all firepower is pilot controlled, and the ships are tough enough to absorb mistakes while you're learning engineering. Small multi-role, Cutlass Black, Nomad, 300 series, perfect solo ships. Everything critical is accessible, firepower is adequate, cargo capacity enables profitable missions. Engineering is complex enough to be engaging but simple enough to manage alone. The Cutlass Black remains the iconic solo ship for good reason. It does everything competently without requiring crew. Medium multi-role, Constellation series, Freelancer series, Corsair, Mercury Star Runner, 400i, this is the solo sweet spot. These ships have enough capability to tackle serious content, enough complexity to reward skill, but remain manageable for solo pilots who understand their systems. The Constellation Andromeda specifically is probably the best solo ship in the game right now, when considering combat capability, cargo capacity, and engineering manageability. Large multi-role, Carrack, 600i, Caterpillar, Hercules series, these start pushing the boundaries of comfortable solo operation. The Caterpillar works fine for cargo hauling because you're not managing complex systems during normal operation. The Hercules series similarly works for logistics, but the Carrack and 600i in combat scenarios? That's genuinely challenging solo because there's just so much ship to manage when things go wrong. Capital ships, Polaris, Idris, Javelin, these are explicitly crew ships. Can you fly them solo? Technically, yes. Should you? Not until AI blades arrive. The amount of ship management required during any complex operation exceeds what one person can reasonably handle. You can use them as mobile bases or for simple logistics, but combat operations or complex missions need crew. Specialized ships, Prospector, Vulture, Mole, Reclaimer, these are profession-specific, and solo viability depends entirely on the profession. Prospector and Vulture are explicitly solo profession ships and work perfectly. The Mole can be flown solo but performs much better with crew. The Reclaimer is technically soloable for salvage, but the efficiency loss compared to crewed operation is substantial. The pattern is clear. Ships under 100 meters are generally solo-friendly. Ships between 100 and 150 meters are manageable solo with skill. Ships over 150 meters start requiring crew for optimal operation. There are exceptions, but that's the general design philosophy. Engineering didn't make solo play impossible. It made bad piloting more punishing and good piloting more rewarding. Before engineering, ship performance was mostly static. You had whatever stats your components provided, and player skill mainly affected aiming and maneuvering. Now, player skill affects ship performance directly through engineering management. Two identical Constellation Andromedas with identical loadouts will perform measurably differently depending on pilot engineering skill. The pilot who actively manages power distribution will have stronger shields, better weapon sustain, and faster recovery from damage. The pilot who ignores engineering will have baseline performance that's adequate but not optimal. That performance gap can easily be 20 to 30%, which is the difference between winning and losing in balanced combat. This is actually more solo-friendly than the previous system, because it means skilled solo pilots can outperform mediocre crews crews through superior individual performance. Before engineering, a mediocre 3-person crew still had 3 times the firepower of a solo pilot just through having more guns active. Now, a skilled solo pilot with optimized engineering can match or exceed that firepower through better power management and system optimization. The perception problem stems from the learning curve. Players who haven't learned engineering yet perform worse than they did before, and they interpret that performance decrease as solo play is dead, rather than I need to learn new systems. Players who invested time learning engineering perform better than before and wonder what everyone is complaining about. The community narrative will probably shift over the next few months as more players learn engineering and realize it's not actually that complex. But right now, we're in this transitional period where loud voices are declaring solo play dead while quietly, thousands of solo players are just playing the game successfully. Star Citizen's solo viability in 2026 is stronger than it's ever been, but it requires more from players than previous versions did. The game is moving away from a simple arcade mechanics towards deeper simulation systems. That transition always creates friction with players who preferred the simpler version, but deeper systems create more opportunities for skilled players to distinguish themselves. Engineering rewards knowledge and practice with tangible performance advantages. That's good game design. The alternative is a game where everyone performs identically regardless of skill level, which sounds terrible. Solo play isn't dead. It evolved. Players who evolve with it will thrive. Players who refuse to adapt will struggle and blame the game. That's been true of every major game system update in history, and it's true now. The ships are there. The missions are there. The income is there. The only question is whether you're willing to spend a few hours learning systems that will benefit you for hundreds of hours afterward. Solo doesn't mean alone, it means independent. And independence is exactly what Star Citizen was designed to enable from the beginning. See you in the black.